I watched in silence as my boss stood under the spotlight, presenting the project I bled for, word for word, slide by slide, like he birthed it himself. He didn't even flinch. That was the moment I knew he'd never give credit. So I gave him something else, a time bomb hidden in the code. When the CEO scrolled to the last slide and paused, his brow furrowed. I leaned back and waited. You ever watch a liar realize the world's about to know the truth? No? Well, you're about to. The office was nearly empty, lit only by the blue glow of my monitor and the hum of the air conditioning. I was still at my desk, fingers twitching on the keyboard, eyes blurry from hours of debugging a neural feedback loop that just wouldn't behave. The clock had long crossed 10 p.m., but I couldn't afford to stop. Spectra, our next-gen AI interface, was still in its infancy, and Richard wanted it perfect before Monday's board demo. Richard Holt, my boss, had pulled me aside 3 months ago. "Strictly confidential," he whispered, eyes sharp behind frameless glasses. "Sign this NDA. The project's off the books. Just me and you. You're the only one I trust with this." I signed. Of course I signed. After all, he'd mentored me when I first joined the company. He vouched for me when I got passed up for promotion. Why would I doubt him? That night, I missed my daughter's preschool graduation. My wife had sent a video of Lily on stage, wearing a tiny cap and gown, reciting a poem about clouds. I watched it on mute while running simulations. She looked around the room, scanning faces. Her smile faltered. I wasn't there. Again. At 2:12 a.m., the code finally compiled without crashing. Relief washed over me, briefly. I sent the final build to Richard's private folder, labeled Spectra Succhiviro Hot 9 Alpha. Attached a note, ready for demo. Needs UI tweaks, but backend is solid. M. 10 minutes later, a reply. Got it. Thanks for your support, Michael. I've forwarded the materials. I blinked at the phrasing. Support? Not work? Not contribution? The next morning, during our weekly team sync, Richard presented a prototype of Spectra. The UI had been polished overnight. He walked the team through its capabilities: dynamic learning, sentiment prediction, autonomous adjustment. He never mentioned my name. I laughed it off at first. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he'd clarify later. But something shifted in the room. Eyes that used to greet me with warmth now barely met mine. Whispers floated past me like cold wind. One engineer leaned over and whispered to another while glancing at me, then looked away. Later that afternoon, I opened the internal repository. My commits were gone. Or rather, overwritten. Same lines, same functions, but under a different author, R. Holt. I clicked on metadata, heart pounding. Timestamps were altered. Even the versioning history had been scrubbed. It was as if I never touched the code. That night, my wife noticed my silence. "You didn't eat," she said. I didn't answer. "Michael, are you sure this isn't what I said it was? That he's not just using you?" I tried to brush it off. "It's just how this project is structured. High-level stuff, you know? Chain of command." She shook her head. "No. I know what exploitation looks like." I didn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I opened a backup folder I kept out of habit, hidden, encrypted, on an external drive. There, untouched, was the original commit. The one with my initials, the raw training data logs, the simulation records. Relief hit me like a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. 2 days later, a file popped up on our internal portal. Spectra. Design origins. Team debrief. It was a video of Richard walking the board through Spectra's concept, laying out the theory, the challenges, and the solutions. He explained the breakthrough in neural predictability like it had been his idea all along. And the worst part? His voice sounded convincing. Sounded right. But I noticed something strange. The video was too perfect. The lighting never changed. His gestures were oddly fluid. His tone never fluctuated. I downloaded the file and ran it through a deepfake analyzer. Confidence level, 83%. It was edited, likely compiled from snippets of his previous talks. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to decide whether to feel betrayed, humiliated, or impressed. Later that night, I played guitar softly in Lily's room until she fell asleep. Her little hand clutched the edge of her blanket. I kept strumming until my fingers ached. Then I set the guitar down, closed the door, and cried in the hallway. Back at my computer, I found a system alert waiting for me. Unusual access detected. User R. Holt viewed private folder, Spectra logs, personal backup. He knew. After the alert, I stopped trusting the system and started building my own. Every line of code I touched, every version I compiled, every time-stamped comment, I logged it into a secure journal encrypted with two-factor authentication and stored off-network. Not just a backup, but a truth ledger. I didn't know who I was protecting myself from anymore, but instinct told me I'd need it. 2 weeks later, the CEO took the stage at our all-hands meeting. The live stream had over 12,000 concurrent viewers, media outlets in attendance, and a slick sizzle reel looping behind him. He beamed like a proud father. Our Spectra initiative, he said, voice booming, is not just an innovation, it is a revolution. And with this, we are preparing to go public, targeting a $10 billion valuation. The room erupted. I stayed silent. Then the screen shifted to a demo. My demo. Same architecture, same flow. Even the minor glitch I hadn't gotten around to fixing showed up for a split second. Only now, the title read, Spectra, a breakthrough by Richard Holt and team. My name was nowhere. I watched Richard smile into the camera, fielding questions with that smooth, confident tone of his. He spun words like silk. Phrases I had written in technical drafts were now quotable lines in his pitch deck. People were clapping. Reporters were nodding. Investors leaned forward, hungry. I sat frozen. My knuckles whitened against the arms of my chair. Back at my desk, I stared at the footage, watching it loop in silence. Rage boiled under my skin, but louder than rage was the question pounding in my head. What if I spoke up? Would I be believed? Or would I be labeled toxic, paranoid, another disposable cog in the machine? My daughter's face flashed in my mind. Her lunchbox I hadn't washed. Her recital I'd missed. And now, her future, tied to a paycheck that could disappear if I challenged the wrong man. I didn't sleep that night. At 3:07 a.m., I received a message from an untraceable address. The subject line read, "Not just you." The message, "You're not the first he's erased." No signature, no context, but I knew exactly who it meant. I read it 3 times. Then I went back to the system. I added a failsafe, a trigger embedded deep within the infrastructure of Spectra. If someone altered any code that bore my original framework, it would activate a chain, generating a report with commit histories, recorded logs, even audio metadata, and send it directly to the CEO's confidential inbox. It wouldn't fire unless provoked. But if it did, the fallout would be nuclear. Later that week, a USB arrived in my mailbox at home. No note, no return address. Inside, an audio recording. I played it on an isolated offline device. Voices filled the room. "Just take credit. Davis won't say a word." Richard's voice, clear, calm. Another man chuckled. "You sure?" "He's scared. He has a kid. Guys like that don't blow things up. They pray someone notices." My stomach turned. I traced the file's metadata. The timestamp dated back nearly a year. Someone had saved this. Someone had waited. Saturday afternoon, I took Lily to the park. She insisted on the swings, then the slide, then the sandbox. I let her bury my shoes in sand. For a moment, I forgot everything. The sky was bright. Her laugh was pure. Sitting on the bench, watching her spin in circles, I asked myself, what if I just walked away? What if I deleted everything, burned the backups, and let the world think Richard was the genius he pretended to be? Would that be so terrible? But then Lily ran over, breathless, and hugged my leg. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you going to be on TV one day too?" I smiled and said nothing. That night, I got another message. No text this time, just a link. It led to a hidden subdomain on the company intranet. Password protected, but I bypassed it using an old root credential I wasn't supposed to have. Inside were test cases, models, and datasets, all labeled Spectra EX. But these weren't part of my design. These weren't built for consumer behavior optimization. They were designed for psychological nudging, political sentiment adjustment, predictive emotional steering. I stared at the screen. Spectra wasn't just an AI assistant anymore. It was a behavioral weapon. The email subject read, "Formal review notice, attendance mandatory." It came from HR but bore the weight of something heavier, something judicial. The body was brief. I was to report to the Internal Oversight Committee for a review of my conduct related to Spectra. No further details. Just a time, a room number, and a warning. Failure to appear will be considered non-compliance. I read it 3 times. My hand stayed still on the mouse, but my stomach dropped. I knew what this was. Richard was making his move. That morning, I walked into the room and found a panel of 5. Legal, HR, a compliance officer I'd never seen before, and 2 executives who once nodded at me in elevators. None looked up when I entered. The questions were mechanical. Had I shared company code externally? Was I in possession of sensitive documents? Had I interfered with the Spectra deployment in any way? They showed me a screen. Security logs that appeared doctored, screenshots of internal chats I'd never sent. A message with my name saying I had reservations about the company's ethical standards. It was fake, but convincing. They didn't want answers. They wanted to corner me. I kept my face neutral. I gave short replies. I didn't deny what they accused me of. I simply asked for the logs, dates, technical reports. They couldn't provide them. The meeting adjourned with cold smiles and a suggestion that my future at the company was under review. Back at my desk, I sat in silence, fired without being fired. The oldest corporate trick. That's when Alex slipped a sticky note onto my keyboard and walked away without stopping. Empty conference room B4, 5 minutes. I followed. Alex was a junior dev, quiet, competent, invisible to most. I'd mentored him once during a deployment that ran 3 nights straight. He never forgot. Inside the empty room, he looked like a man about to confess to murder. "I shouldn't be doing this," he said, reaching into his hoodie and pulling out a small USB stick. "But I saw what they showed you. That's not the real data. It's been scrubbed." He pushed the USB into my hand and stepped back. "This has the raw logs, pre-manipulation, your commits, the AI training footage with your voice comments, all of it. I cloned the server before they wiped it. Alex, if they find out I helped you, I'm done. Not just fired, blacklisted." I held the stick tight in my hand. My jaw clenched. "You can burn me if you use it," he added, "but maybe you won't have to." When he left, I sat alone in the fluorescent quiet, staring at the door. If I used this, I could expose everything. I could clear my name, maybe take the whole structure down with it. But I'd drag Alex into the fire. Would I risk someone else's career for the truth? Would I be any better than Richard? That night, the question lingered like a splinter. If you know the truth can collapse the whole system, but it puts a good person in the blast radius, what do you choose? I didn't sleep. The next morning, I booted an air-gapped laptop, loaded the data from the USB, and started building. Not a report, not a letter, a timeline. Spectra Truth. Net went live at 4:17 a.m. The homepage held a single message. Truth doesn't ask for permission. Underneath, a chronological breakdown of every major milestone in Spectra's creation, with metadata, video logs, server timestamps, and development credits, all signed by cryptographic hash. I didn't post my name. I didn't need to. Within 12 hours, anonymous views crossed the 30,000 mark. The site spread through tech forums, employee Slack channels, even Reddit. Comments flooded in. Then the emails started. First, quietly. Then as a wave. He stole my build too. They edited my comments before filing patent paperwork. I thought I was crazy until I saw your post. One by one, whistleblowers stepped out from the shadows. Anonymous uploads poured in. Evidence of manipulated QA scores, fake demos, last-minute code swaps. Richard's empire wasn't a fluke. It was a pattern. Still, he held firm. He appeared on a morning show 3 days later, beaming with confidence. "We're not just building AI," he told the host. "We're building new truth, a world shaped by intelligence and integrity." I watched the clip with my arms folded. He was slick. He had charm. But he was lying through his teeth. Later that evening, my inbox pinged. It was a direct message. From the CEO. Subject line: Spectra Authorship Review, Confidential, Mandatory Meeting. No greeting. Just a time and a title. Regarding AI intellectual property attribution. The conference room was a cathedral of glass and power. Executives lined the long oak table. Cameras rolled in silence from multiple angles. Investors, clients, media reps, all seated, all waiting. The screen behind Richard pulsed with the Spectra logo. He stood tall, tailored in navy blue, calm as ever. To anyone else, it was just another keynote. But to me, it was the culmination of everything he'd stolen. I was in the back, standing in the shadows, press badge clipped to my shirt under a different name. No one noticed. That was always my role anyway. Unnoticed. He began speaking. Same cadence, same polished lines. Spectra represents a leap in AI consciousness. We are proud to... The screen blinked. Once, twice, then went black. A second later, a large QR code replaced the logo. No branding, no music. Just stark black and white. Phones came out. Whispers echoed. One executive leaned forward and scanned the code, frowned, then turned to another. Within seconds, murmurs turned to outrage. The page it linked to, spectratruth.net. The entire data set, video logs, code commits, tampered security footage, the AI's hidden objectives, all of it, public. Richard froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The CEO turned in his chair slowly. Their eyes met. Richard took a step back, stumbled, and his chair clattered to the floor. His face drained of color. Gasps filled the room. But the CEO didn't speak. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even blink. He stood, walked to the front, picked up the remote, and changed the slide manually to a simple title card. Truth has a way of finding its voice. Then he turned back to the room. "I believe it's time we answer some questions," he said quietly. The media swarmed in. I slipped out before the crowd could react. Back through service corridors, down stairwells, past the smell of disinfectant and warm wiring. Outside, the air felt thin. I walked 3 blocks without direction, then found myself at a bench overlooking the bay. I pulled out my phone. A message from my wife sat unread. No text. Just a photo. Us, 10 years ago. Wedding day. Her in a pale silver dress. Me in a tux that didn't quite fit. She was smiling at the camera. I was looking at her. She was the one who'd pushed me to apply at the company, who'd told me I belonged in rooms like that, who believed I could matter. I sat with the photo for a long time. Back inside the company, chaos erupted. The FBI was notified within 24 hours. Subpoenas were filed. Hard drives were seized. What started as a whisper about code theft became a scream about national data ethics. Turns out, Spectra wasn't just a personal play for power. It was a weaponized behavioral tool with backdoor access to sentiment data from multiple national surveys. Someone had sold its early beta to a foreign research division, quietly, illegally, and that someone was Richard. The company's general counsel resigned. 3 VPs took sudden leaves of absence. Investor calls were canceled. Lawsuits were threatened. The story exploded across every tech outlet. Whistleblower AI engineer exposes 10BD fraud. My name wasn't public, but my work was. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. A private message from the CEO. He asked to meet. We sat in his office. No assistants, no attorneys. Just the two of us. I read every word on that site, he said. I knew Richard was a manipulator. I just didn't know how far he'd go. His voice had weight. Not just authority, history. He looked me in the eyes. He did this to me once, years ago. Smaller scale, internal credit theft. I was a nobody back then, and I didn't have the spine to fight back. I didn't know what to say. You had the spine, he said, and the receipts. He walked over to the window, then turned back to face me. I need someone to oversee our internal investigation. Build out a clean AI ethics board. Make sure this doesn't happen again. Then after a pause, but if you say no, I won't hold it against you. I said nothing. Not yet. Because for the first time in weeks, I didn't have an answer ready. They found me 2 days after the press conference. I was sitting alone at a cafe near the water. Same place I always went when I needed to think. The kind where the servers don't make small talk and the coffee always tastes burnt. The man who approached me was dressed like someone who didn't want to be remembered. Nondescript jacket, no watch, shoes that didn't creak. He sat across from me without asking. You don't know me, he said, calm, pleasant, but we've been watching you. I didn't move. You made quite a splash, he continued. And that kind of courage, well, it has a price. Not everyone likes what you did, but some of us respect it. He slid a card across the table. Black, unmarked. Flip it over when you're ready. Then he stood, adjusted his cuffs, and disappeared down the street. I waited an hour before touching it. On the back, a simple QR code. No numbers, no text. When I scanned it at home, it opened a portal to a private video meeting set for midnight. I clicked in. 6 faces appeared, blurred, voice masked. One by one, they introduced themselves by code names: Echo, Meridian, Zeal, etc. Investors, technologists, strategists. A hidden network of elite minds operating beyond national borders. We're not here to threaten you, one of them said. Quite the opposite. You've proven you can shake the foundation, said another. We're offering you something rare. A new identity. A clean slate. $10 million. Move discreetly into assets offshore. In exchange, I would destroy all backups, close the whistleblower site, walk away, and agree to silence. You'll never have to worry about a thing again, Meridian promised. I asked why they cared. Because Spectra was just the beginning, Echo replied. There are other systems, more advanced, better hidden. What you exposed disrupted one node. We're offering you peace, a life. Then came the twist. The final face on screen unmasked. Dylan Walker. We'd been roommates in college. He was brilliant, arrogant, and reckless. He once stole a research paper from me and submitted it as his own, getting published while I stayed quiet. We hadn't spoken in 15 years. "Hey, Mike," he said with a grin that hadn't aged a day. "Small world, huh?" I ended the call. That night, Lily crawled into bed with us, said she had a nightmare about the sky falling. She clung to me in her sleep. I lay awake, watching her breathe. In the dark, I whispered, "I just want you to grow up in a world where people still tell the truth." The next morning, my inbox lit up. An encrypted message routed through military servers. Access key verified my credentials from the Spectra investigation. Inside, a report. Project Spectra X has been cloned. Instances found in multiple international servers. Intent unknown. Trace routes suggest non-government entities involved. Spectra wasn't dead. It had multiplied. I stared at the screen for minutes. The edges of my vision blurred. My hands went cold. Then I made my choice. I called the Department of Digital Defense. The next few days moved fast, faster than I could process. I signed a federal agreement and became part of a newly formed AI ethics task force directly under a joint cybersecurity intelligence wing. I was briefed on hidden operations, rogue developers, weaponized sentiment models, systems designed to influence populations without detection. And I wasn't just an analyst. I was a symbol. The media pounced. The whistleblower engineer returns, Michael Davis to lead global AI oversight. One man exposed the lie. Now he's hunting the rest. It didn't feel like victory. Not exactly, but it felt necessary. One evening, while reviewing transnational data flows, a new report came across my screen. Subject: Richard Holt. Interrogation update. Against advice, I requested to attend. We met in a windowless room, just the two of us. He looked thinner, older. A gray coat of sweat glistened on his forehead. No suit, no smugness. I didn't speak first. He did. "I never thought you had the guts." I didn't respond. "I'm not the only villain here," he continued. "You think I built this monster alone?" He leaned forward, eyes bloodshot. "I have names. Directors, CTOs, people funding Spectre clones across 5 countries. Why tell me? Because if they think I flipped, they'll panic. They'll make mistakes. Use me. Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," he said with a crooked smile. "But they're bigger than both of us." I left with a file. Not one, but multiple names. Some I recognized. Others I didn't. The web went deeper. Later that night, I sat in Lily's room, watching her sketch with crayons. She was drawing a robot that tells the truth. "You gonna make one of these?" she asked. "I'm trying," I said. She nodded, serious. "Make sure it doesn't lie." That moment hit harder than any press headline or government medal, because I knew now. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about protection. Truth wasn't a destination. It was a defense. Still, I couldn't ignore the weight of Richard's words. I couldn't shake the irony. The man who tried to erase me had just helped shine a light on something far worse. And that left me with a question I hadn't answered yet. If your enemy opens a door to a deeper truth, do you still see him as your enemy? I turned down every offer. Tech giants threw stock options, obscene salaries, corner offices with glass walls and billion-dollar views. They wanted me to be their new ethical face, the man who stood for truth. But I saw through it. They weren't interested in change. They were interested in optics, leverage, damage control. So I built something else. With a small team, 2 engineers, a policy writer, and an ex-journalist, we formed AI Transparency, a nonprofit dedicated to auditing algorithms, investigating bias in machine learning systems and creating public open source records of AI behavior. No secrets, no NDAs, no spectacle, just light. We worked from a modest office, above a bakery, in a building with creaky floors and terrible Wi-Fi. But the work felt real, clean. 3 years passed. Lily was a teenager now, louder, funnier, sharper than I ever imagined. One evening, she knocked on my office door, laptop in hand. "Dad," she said, "you got to see this." She had found a game, one of those online battle sims where kids compete for points, glory, virtual gear. But the algorithm behind it was rigged. Certain accounts were given invisible boosts, depending on how much money their parents spent. She'd found the flaw, reverse-engineered the system, and built a patch. "I'm not posting it or anything," she said quickly. I don't like when stuff's unfair." I stared at her. I hadn't taught her how to do this, not directly. But somehow, the fire had passed on. She smiled awkwardly. "Want to help me clean it up?" We worked on it together that night, fixing bugs, writing documentation. When we finished, she uploaded it anonymously to a gaming forum. Justice.exe, she called it. I didn't say it then, but I'd never felt prouder. A week later, I received a letter, official, sealed, with a department header. They wanted me to chair a new federal commission, the Ethical Oversight Board for Autonomous Systems. It would oversee the development and deployment of all large-scale AI infrastructures in the country. The offer was real, serious, historic. I read the letter 3 times. Then I let it sit on my desk. Because something in me hesitated, not out of fear, but because I'd seen how power, even in good hands, shifts over time. I didn't know if I wanted to become another gatekeeper, another face in a machine built to look trustworthy. The next month, I was invited to speak at a TED conference, not about Spectra, not about whistleblowing, but about transparency and what it costs. I stepped onto the stage in a gray sweater, not a suit, no slides, just my voice. "I'm not special," I said. "I'm not a genius. I didn't invent anything new. I just didn't stay silent." The room was quiet. I told them about Spectra, about Richard, about the price of exposure, and about the world that changes, not because of heroes, but because someone, somewhere, refuses to disappear. Afterward, a young man approached me in the lobby. He looked nervous. "I work at a robotics firm," he said. "Last year, my manager removed my name from a patent application. I didn't fight it. I thought maybe it was just how things worked." He looked me in the eyes. "Then I read your story, and I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone." He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note. "Thank you for not shutting up. You helped me find my voice." I kept that note in my wallet. Weeks later, I visited a correctional facility to speak to a group of inmates about digital rehabilitation programs. It was part of a new initiative funded by AI Transparency, teaching coding and ethics to inmates who wanted a second chance. In the prison library, I saw him, Richard. He was older now, thinner. His hands were pale, his face hollow. He wore a gray jumpsuit and held a paperback book. It was my book, Truth in the System, A Quiet Rebellion. He didn't see me. I didn't say anything, just watched him turn the page slowly, eyes scanning every word. I don't know what he felt. Regret? Jealousy? Peace? Maybe it didn't matter anymore. That night, I came home late. Lily had already fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket half draped across her legs, her glasses still on. I knelt beside her, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and I whispered, "I kept the promise, didn't I?" She stirred, but didn't wake. I sat there for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the night, thinking not of code or conspiracies, but of her laugh, her fire, her belief that unfair things can and should be fixed. And I knew then, what we build matters, but what we protect matters more.